Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Samira Tilley, Industry Marketing Manager at Assemble Systems. In today's webinar, we will look at how Matheson Constructors is using a collaborative approach to project cost management and coordination. Now let's get started. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Tim Kelly, Senior Product Manager at Assemble. Go ahead, Tim.
Thanks, Samira. Just a brief agenda to start today. We're going to actually run through a new use case and work through the process with Matheson Construction. First, we're going to dive into some introductions of both myself and of Tyler, then some brief introductions of companies, and then we'll dive through his use case and then into some Q&A. So that said, to start, my name is Tim Kelly. I'm the Senior Product Manager for the Assemble product at Autodesk. Within that role, we fit in kind of the broader picture of the construction services at Autodesk. And prior to being acquired and our company joining Autodesk, Assemble provides software, obviously focus on quantity information, pre-construction, ultimately using model data for driving construction workflows. My role in that actually comes over a long period of time working in pre-construction and in construction leveraging model data. So my background is in construction management and using tools and aspects of things like Assemble through that workflow, that process. So with that said, I'm going to actually wind myself back and introduce you to today's speaker, Tyler Holditch.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for the introduction. My name's Tyler Holditch. I'm the VDC Manager at Matheson Constructors. And just a little brief about myself. I started from the architectural game, utilizing BIM as my platform for design and construction. And over the years, obviously, I've acquired more skill sets and different types of software, eventually leading me to the general contract and construction management side of things, where I'm starting to analyze that information and create a process to analyze that information. We do work on a variety of projects. We work from everything from civil jobs to highly engineered ICI builds. We were established in 2008. Since then, the company's grown from one person to over 100 staff across Ontario. And we're currently on target right now to hit about $200 million a year. Matheson Constructors is associated with the Ontario General Contractors Association, the Toronto Construction Association, as well as the Northeastern Ontario Construction Association. In terms of a role that Matheson provides, we provide general contracting, construction management, as well as design build services, again, to a variety of civil and ICI construction projects. In doing so, we have basically come to a workflow process with Matheson Constructors, and we've incorporated that workflow into our virtual design and construction department. Talking a little bit about our virtual design and construction department at Matheson Constructors, we're actually only a team of 3 individuals, but as I kind of go through the process that we've incorporated in terms of a workflow of information, you start to see that it's not really just the 3 BIM individuals. We're starting to incorporate the entire company, so everyone can start to input information and read the same information from a collaborative standpoint, which I'll dive into a little bit shortly. Just talking to the slides you see on the screen now, we utilize point clouds here. We do 4D schedules. We do clash detection, and we even do virtual reality. And over the years, we've progressed into that. But what's been left behind are the individuals and all the information that don't really kind of correspond with the technical savviness of doing point clouds and 4D schedules. You're starting to see a larger gap between the people who can accommodate and participate in the BIM process while leaving behind a large variety of people who don't. And that's why I kind of highlighted here the document/data management from a company standpoint. So just to touch on the importance of the collaboration between office staff and the field staff, we want to help control project costs. Being able to gather all this data, analyze it, and to put that information in the hands of everybody internally and externally, it gives greater capabilities of analyzing that data. So if there's any issues, it gets caught ahead of time and not later on when it's going to be most timely and most costly, if you will. We're empowering field teams by giving us information. The information is now real-time data We're creating a data repository over time, and we're going to maintain cost history.
Real quick, Tyler, before you move on to the next slide, I just want to state, and you mentioned this as part of your BIM team, you guys might be a small team, but you're not the end user. This information is about how you can enable project teams or empower project teams with additional data, additional insights, extra information, if you will, more readily. So can you talk a little bit about your team structure, the types of projects you guys heavily support versus maybe the core projects that work really well between your team and the field teams?
Sure. I will be following up with a case study on one of the projects that we really incorporated BIM. But the great thing about our process here is, and you kind of mentioned BIM jobs and process. Well, based on what we're doing with all this information and being able to collect all this data and put it in front of the end user, as you said, even the jobs that are so-called non-BIM jobs out there nowadays are turning into BIM jobs. It may not necessarily have a 3D model, if you will, a Revit model or a source of that data, but being able to take the analytical data and put it in the hands of the end user, again, as you said, in my mind, is starting to pull all of these people together into one place.
Yeah, awesome. I just wanted to make sure we touched on that because previous slide showing some of the work you guys have done over the last decade. It's such a wide spectrum of types of projects, and it's good to hear that you're able to actually navigate the BIM aspect of kind of each and all of that.
Well, actually, that's a very valid point. You look at all the different types of jobs, and you're going to have so much information out there that pertains specifically to one job or maybe across all jobs in general. But having the ability to take that information and to mold it and manipulate it in a way that seems fit for the individual job itself or that individual person on the job even is Sure. where you start to see the value. Because you can collect data until the end of time, but if you can't read it and analyze it, then what's the point?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So again, I have a little case study here, and I'm going to incorporate my workflow. Our previous strategy and where I've come to incorporate all of this information and to create a better workflow and process so that this information is all going to the same place relatively quickly and, again, going to the end user without them having to sift through years of information, rows and rows of columns and columns of data just kind of floating around on everybody's desktop. Here on the screen, you can kind of get a sense of our previous strategy, if you will, and the way that we used to process information here at Matheson Constructors. And I've kind of thrown a line in the middle because this is where you start to get your divide of information. You've got all your savvy BIM individuals who are able to manipulate Revit models. They can take 3D elements from CAD. They can go into point clouds and they can sift through this information. And we put it into Assemble, which has been a great utilization and a great tool for reading that information and getting those models out to the team. And we were able to create dashboards in Power BI, which I'm going to get to shortly to show that information. But the concern I had back then was all of these Excel sheets that we know we have in my document folders, we have it on a server in the back of a room, in the back of an office, and it's lost valuable data in my opinion. You've got old estimates, budgets. You can start to reconcile this information and you can start to look at a history of where prices are going, where they statistical analysis, and it's kind of hard to kind of specifically say what you're going to look for, but the idea is that once you have all this information in Assemble and into Power BI, you can start to manipulate it to look at any which way you want. And it's worth noting that Excel's been around for over 30 years, so you can only imagine how much data is out there just waiting to be sifted.
And I can also imagine that many of those on the call know that project managers or estimators may bring, from company to company, Excel spreadsheets or templates that they prefer. And so even within one group of estimators, you may not have consistency because there's different preference. And Excel really allows for that. And kind of fosters that sort of, I'm going to do the process exactly the way I want to do it. So sifting through any of that information can become really, really difficult. So even just in the sense of it being a widespread product over 30 years and it being a core component that you're going to see everywhere, it makes it really difficult to leverage any of that information at all.
Right.
And so shifting that out of that.
You got it. And just speaking to that, where you're saying that people have certain ways of formatting that information and they they kind of move around from companies and they pull that information with them. I don't know how many times I've seen just that. You have estimator 1 and estimator 2 open their Excel sheet, completely different formats, and then they spend an entire day to amalgamate that data to another Excel sheet, which is just going to be lost on and in my document folder, right?
Exactly.
And I kind of touch on just estimators, but it's not just estimators. Everybody's got a little worksheet with an Excel spreadsheet, if you will, with data that just gets lost. And it's a big data dump, if you will. I've heard that term kind of thrown around here and there. So I'm just going to jump to the next slide here. So on the screen now, you see our new approach here at Matheson Constructors. We're still starting with the same idea that we have Revit models being provided, whether it's point clouds, AutoCAD. To be honest, that list is very extensive. You can actually pull quite a bit of information into Assemble. But you see, we don't stop the process anymore before we hand off the information. We're starting to incorporate that lost, valuable data. And it doesn't end there. It actually, there's really no limit to where you connect that data from. Assemble's done a great job of creating a connector, which I'll talk to a little bit further on in the presentation. But in doing so, we can start to pull through Assemble, pull in that lost, valuable data, any other data you want, to create a dashboard for the end user that can be manipulated in each and every custom way for that person.
That's perfect. And just really quick, for what it's worth, for those that aren't familiar with Power BI, Power BI is a product by Microsoft. If you have Office 365, you likely have a license of it. It is free for you to download, so you can actually download Power BI and use it yourself for free and connect Assemble to it. But it, as Tyler said, it can connect to a host of different data sources and bring information together. Ultimately, it's a business intelligence engine that allows you to create those dashboards and the reports in a flexible nature.
So just a little case study that I wanted to talk about, and this is just a little tidbit of what you can do with the information that's available by utilizing Power BI. I'm going to walk through and show how the data was previously unorganized, if you will, and how it can be very messy, hard to read, hard to analyze. And then I'm going to start to walk through and show you how I can take that same information and kind of make it more readily available, and then show a couple of ideas what you can do with that information, even though previously you would think it's just an Excel sheet full of data. So I'm just going to go back and talk a little bit about this project that I'm going to use as a case study. This is a project that we worked on that was valued at over $120 million, 320,000 square feet of construction build. We had 30 acres of site work that was in development when we were on site. And we actually had over 130,000 tons of material delivered to site. And you can only imagine what that would be like for, let's say, a site soup or a site admin on site, pulling in these waybills every delivery every day. We had envelopes and envelopes full of these waybill tickets. And here you can see there's a snapshot of what that information would look like if it was just directly put into an Excel sheet. I like to highlight a couple of issues here with this unorganized data. It's not always available to the entire team, and it always requires additional processing, whether that's being imported into another piece of software and then PDF sent out through an email, which again gets lost and put into everybody's project folders, if you will. You get things, you got the people on site, they don't necessarily follow proper document nomenclature. Titles of Excel sheets can get all funky. You start to lose them. They put them in different places. You can see here the list of information it's there, but it's very hard to read, and how do you analyze that? And then you even get things like people typing different types of date formats. Maybe one person on a job will call the job title project name, whereas in another Excel sheet it's called job title, and there's no correlation between the two. But I'm going to touch on how you can create a relationship in Power BI in just a few moments.
And just the amount of manual entry here too, you mentioned 4,000 plus waybills that come in. That's a piece of paper. Someone's entering this data. As you go through that much data entry, that you're bound to have, that 9-digit number messed up at some point. So you want to make sure you're consistently managing and clearly articulating exactly where there are duplicates and things like reducing that error-prone entry process.
Right, and one of the little things I'm going to talk about too is just that. If you get a duplicate of a ticket typed in, Well, how do you find that in a list of 4,000 waybills quickly? And maybe you could do that with one through Excel, but how do you do that at a global scale of all your jobs? But again, I'll talk to that in a couple minutes here. Oh, and just one more thing on what you said about an individual sitting there. They're manually typing this information. If they don't properly put it into one place that everybody can access, I guarantee you someone else somewhere else in that company is going to retype that same information. And now you just have redundant work and wasted man hours. So what I'm actually going to do before I jump to this slide is go over to an Excel sheet with some of those waybills in it. All right, so you see here, you've got this list of waybills, you've got some information, and now I'm going to do is jump over to Power BI, which we just briefly talked about, and show how that information can be pulled in.
So as he's setting up Power BI and stepping in through pulling this information together, if you guys aren't familiar with Power BI, but you are familiar with Excel, this is like an Excel pivot table. You're aggregating data and you're looking at it in a bunch of different kind of slice and dice that information to find and drill into specific aspects. So before we dive into it, if you get a little bit lost in the details of setting up Power BI, certainly the Assemble team can help you step through this process and get it set up and drill into exactly what workflow you guys want to accomplish within Power BI.
Yeah, actually, Tim, the dashboards that you guys set up as kind of a preliminary example are a great benefit. You can take that and you can work with it and mold it to create really beautiful dashboards. So thank you for that. So what I just want to show here is this is just a folder on my desktop. This is the way that I'd say most of the people out there work files and their filing system. Now on Peace Natural's that case sample, what we did is using a cloud-based server, our folder structure, if you will, is just hosted on my computer, but it's cloud-based and it's connected back to a central database. That's not too important to what I'm about to go through, but the idea is that you can kind of reach out across everybody's computer and pull this information into one folder. That aside, what I'm going to show is Power BI is directly connected to this folder that you see right now. And if I jump over to Power BI, you see the same information that was in the Excel sheet. But what I'm going to quickly show you, and I'm not going to actually walk through the steps, I've pre-done those steps here. I'm going to show how easily you can start to wash this information and start to analyze it. So there's a few steps where you start to populate information. I'm actually going to filter out all my zero tickets, and within a couple of steps, I know it's kind of hard to follow, but I'm actually washing that data. I'm cleaning it up. And by doing so, I start to create the ability to recreate this list. Right? I got bill number tickets, the tonnage that goes with that. Maybe I want to see the date it was delivered. Maybe I want a description, see what type of granular it was. And then I can go and I can even modify these particular instances. I want to change my date. Instead of being hierarchical, I'm going to just change it to standard date. And you see a list. And that's great. So this is just the first step in the process. I'm going to get to the good stuff soon. But what I want to talk about quickly is the data that I'm using from Assemble. What we did on that case study, and I'll just jump back quickly, we used point clouds on this project to scan the topography. And in doing so, we took that point cloud data to Revit. We took the Revit models to Assemble. And by doing that, I was able to start to pull in what we needed in terms of fill for the project. So we've got a list here of deliverables, all the tickets for granular. And now below, what I'm going to show is the data pulling from Assemble. Right now, it's telling me that I've got a fill of 24,500, but I need to know what project that's for, because right now it's going across all my projects on Assemble, down, and pick project type. Oh, there we go, project one. I know that this is all for project one. And again, this project number one is being pulled from Excel, and my project one here is being pulled from Assemble. So what does this mean? So you start to take this data, you can publish the data to a common dashboard. I've done a quick snapshot here, and I'll give you a little live demonstration on how this dashboard works in a second. But it starts to make that data easily readable. It's easy to read. It's simple to wash the data. You can control and restrict this information to who you give it to via the dashboards. You can start to analyze the data in a fashion that suits each individual custom need. Tim, you kind of talked about how estimators look at information in a certain format. Well, having this ability to remold the information to suit that custom estimator. I think it's very valuable rather than trying to get all the estimators to learn a different format, and it allows all the team members to contribute to that information, as you see through the Excel workflow that we did with that, the list of waybills.
Yeah, and as you start to build out this dashboard, you're consuming data from a number of different sources, but it's, as you mentioned, you wash that information so you can start to align them together, and those data sources start to allow for analysis across what's required versus what is coming in, and what the status is. So why don't you talk a little bit as you're going through this next step about that audience, who's getting this information, and so what? So what is this helping them do?
Right. So that's kind of my final point that I'm working towards. But speaking to that, the idea of being able to pull all this information from different sources to one area, to washing it, is great. But the other aspect of it that I think is even more valuable is the fact that once you pull this information to one place, it's always here, it's static, and you never have to go looking for it again. Once you've done it once, it's there, and you can continue to work with it. And touching on what can you do with this information, who's it good for, it's kind of up in the air because it's good for everybody, and it depends on what they're looking for. But the idea comes back to the information's there, and we can kind of sort it and filter it in a way that's beneficial for an individual person. And just jumping back to the case study, we did that, and we were able to get all that information in the hands of the site super. So you start to look at all the deliveries, and you start to amalgamate your totals. I can tell based on my waybills that I've had 1,473 tons delivered. So what I'll actually do is I'll just kind of walk through this little dashboard that I have built up here to show you all the different things you can do. And this is only pulling two types of information. Well, technically three, but it's just pulling the waybill information from an Excel sheet, which was put in, the data entry was done from someone on site using an Excel sheet. It was a site admin. So as I go over here, you start to see you can actually interconnect all of this data. So if you want to kind of review data from other jobs, the click of a button, you start jumping through project to project. Or maybe you even want to put two projects together to see how it works as a total. Maybe you're looking for projects in a certain region and you want to know what deliveries are like. I can even filter by location where my granular deliveries were coming from. If I want to know how much granular deliveries coming from location 2, the click of a button, I can see here it's actually giving me my average deliveries per day, and all that information again was just pulled by number of deliveries divided by the number of days that were delivered. Maybe I want to check out location 1. Based on this, I can see that I'm getting more deliveries from location 2, and that information, in my opinion, right there would give the site super or the project manager a little bit more of a heads up that there seems to be an issue with deliveries from one location. So maybe they're running out of granular, maybe they don't have enough drivers. Whatever the case is, we're kind of analyzing that from a greater scale. So I start to go through. This here is a tons required. This one here is interesting, in my opinion, because the data that's coming out of the Revit model is strictly volume. The data that's coming from the deliveries is strictly weight, and we know those don't correspond. Touching on the fact that we can go back through 30 years of data, analyzing what that approximate tonnage to volume, I can put in a what-if statements. If I think that my tons of granular are at 1.8 tons per cubic meter, I can put that data through, and it's going to tell me based on my Revit model, it's approximately 44,000 tons of granular required. If for some reason someone comes back and says the compression ratio of that granular is going to change and we're actually going to have to get more tonnage per cubic meter, touch of a button, I can go and I can analyze that.
So when you're doing that analysis and as you're talking through this, you're talking about granular. And just for clarity, I want to state that this could certainly be any material delivery to the project. And the process of pushing that information through Assemble and then collecting delivery tickets and analysis of what's required per activity or per trade against what's been delivered or what's been installed. I think that it's easy to say, or it absolutely could be pulled into Power BI to do that same sort of analysis across any other production.
That's it. Really, if it has a number associated to it, I don't see why you can't track that, analyze it, and predict. So what I just did while you're just kind of talking quickly is I copied in a bunch of more waybills, and I talked about how sometimes they don't name them right, incorrect titles, whatever the case may be. But what I've done is I've dumped all of this Excel sheets into one location. And that's the idea of this. All the information is in one place, and all I'm going to do is go back to Power BI, and I'm going to pull that data through. And now let's just analyze 8 sheets worth of waybills, 901 deliveries. And you can start to see now that I've done it over a certain amount of time, you're even analyzing this at a greater detail, right? I can see that the number of deliveries slowly falls off as time comes on. Here you got 26, 27, 28. We've hit a snag. And maybe this is when the PM needs to call the delivery guys over at the granular station and say, hey, you know what? We need more deliveries. Based on the rate that we're getting deliveries right now, we're not going to meet our target supply. Over here, you got a nice little gas tank showing that we're only at 44% of the anticipated deliveries required. Over 8 days of delivery, maybe I need this done in 10 days. Clearly, I'm not going to make it. Something needs to be fixed. Again, all of this information is interconnected. Up here, I see a list. Let's say I've got way bill number 1500205557. By simply clicking on it, it's telling me that it's coming from location 2. It tells me that it's granular B. Obviously, it was only one delivery for that specific one. But it drills down to that specific delivery, and whether it's deliveries at a scale of 901 or just one, you can start to analyze that. Talking about washing data, what I've done here is I put a little checkbox, a check row, if you will, or a column, which lets me know if there's duplicates. If the site admin happened to type in the same waybill twice because they're busy, you can only imagine how many pieces of paper they have. Well, I can sit here and check it. If there's 2 of the same bill number, it gives me a warning, and it says, hey, you got to do something about this. And again, just at the click of a button, I'm going to come here and add all of my sources from my Excel sheets. I'm going to go back to wherever I had that double, the duplicate waybill, and by clicking a button, it's telling me exactly which Excel sheet to go to. So now I'm washing that data. I can go back to the originating Excel sheet, fix it, and by a simple refresh, fix that data that's being input into this common dashboard. One thing I really like about all of this, and it comes back to how do I get this information into the hands of the end user? Because again, right now I'm only in a common piece of software that not everybody has access to. What you do with this is you actually publish it to a dashboard that's web-based, and this is where you start to distribute it to all the end users. And you've essentially taken a company of 100 people and you turn them all into BIM users because they're all inputting information and they're all reading the same information at the end of the day. And here's an example of that web-based dashboard, right? So again, you can put this in the hands of anybody. They have the same ability to manipulate the information. They can dive through it any which way they want. If they happen to want a different dashboard with different information, by all means, we can put that together. But it doesn't take long because, again, that information is all in one central data environment.
Yeah, and so you're giving them direct access to the most current, most up-to-date information. You're aggregating, again, what's required for the job, what the current status is, and as these things are input and tracked, they can actually, like you mentioned before, they can make the phone call that they need to make based on the input here. And if if you have a project executive that is the guy that makes that phone call and he's spread across 3 locations, maybe he's not on the particular job site that given day. This is that insight that he might need for project 1 to drill in and see exactly what's going on for that particular project and timely make a call to make the adjustment. Now, there's argument to be said about the guy that is on site saying, you know what, I'm watching what's going on, and I have a feeling that we're not keeping track with what we need. but that's only part of it, and that's only one lens. This provides a broader aperture, broader lens for a number of projects across a given business or business unit, and you can really use this at an executive level to understand exactly what's going on and have much more insight. So can you talk a little bit about the insights that your team experiences when using this sort of information?
Sure. I think it's kind of what you talked about, having there's going to be a certain individual on the job who's watching this job, and most likely a number of jobs from a greater scale, from an overall scale, and being able to take all this information. So actually what I'll show you is this here may be too complicated for that particular person. And we can actually take this one step further and put this information in their pocket. So you've got a nice organized dashboard. It might be a little bit too complicated, but if I go to a phone app here, it's a matter of dragging and dropping this block over, and maybe even my little gas tank, and this app is now on their phone, published, and the information is going into the pocket as fast as it's going into the Excel sheets on site. So you're limiting that, you're limiting the disconnect by the time that information does go through the system, if you will. Because again, you're looking at a common data environment rather than Excel sheets on people's document folders, emails that haven't been forwarded because so-and-so's on vacation. And really, what you do with this information, your possibilities are endless. You talked about the site guys looking at this information, and the people inside the office are sifting through it just as much as the guys on site. But knowing that they're all looking at the same information is probably the most valuable aspect. Looking at the lack of redundancy that could be out there and mitigating all your possible issues, I think start to speak for itself. And we've only been working with this for a little over a year now, but I can only imagine where we're going to be now that people are getting on board with this. It's getting a lot easier to use now that more connectors are being readily available. And now with Assemble being able to dive right into this, our BIM department and our field guys are now an integral single entity. I think this was the final piece to pull in the less tech-savvy individuals that we've kind of strayed away from over the last couple of years as the technology's been advancing. I've realized that we've left some people behind. Originally, I was looking at a way to try to get them up to speed, how to teach them how to use all this new software, but that doesn't seem to be the case. I'm sure there's some people on the line right now and we're shaking their heads saying they never want to have to log into a cloud-based, web-based application to start inputting information. They're comfortable with the Excel sheets. They've been doing it for 20 years. It's just their way, and I think this is the most efficient and productive way to start tying all that together.
Yeah, absolutely, and you can allow for with this sort of integration of that Excel import or input with the assemble aspect and consuming model-based information, consuming direct project information. You're able to really quickly leverage all of those inputs from the various users and process it in a way that has a positive impact on your day-to-day operations of a job. So I think that's really valuable. I also think the fact that you have a little bit of flexibility in saying, okay, I sit in front of a computer every day, so I might want a little more information. I can see that. Or I'm standing out on the job site and I have a little bit less information or more concise information. It's certainly a win-win in that situation. So really, really valuable.
Right? Everybody's got a phone in their pocket nowadays. They know how to open an app. If they can open an app and see, like right now on the screen, I'm looking at hours and hours of a site admin typing away, putting their bill ticket information, the tonnage. Maybe the price, I want to include the price with it. I've got a lump sum price I got to hit, and all of a sudden my Division 1 is starting to get up the creek and kind of analyze why and try to do something about it before it's too late.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what all this information is about. It's catching something before it's too late. You're mitigating cost. You're improving performance. And back to the slide that we talked about where cost history, actually I should pull the slide up because it hit such relevant points to the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just kind of your key bullet points there, your key takeaway. Obviously, this is Division 1 or first step in what could be done for all sorts of materials. Again, that desktop dashboard could be something that's looking across the whole project, and the mobile app or the mobile dashboard is looking at just what's going on right now. You have a lot of flexibility in that, and ultimately you're using a common data environment to keep one set of information and analyzing data that's coming from a number of different sources, connecting them all together. So,
and that's right. And I think as valuable as that little app that I showed you with the tonnage delivered, what's great to that specific individual, being able to go back to those, again, 30 years of Excel sheets. And then now it might not be super simple, but the idea is as you start to go through and pull that data in, you're creating a repository that's only going to get greater, more accurate, more valuable as time goes on.
Absolutely.
Or I should say as time has already gone on because you're collecting previous data.
Sure. I really want to say thanks, Tyler. I know setting this up and sharing this information and the preparation that goes into providing webinar content can be quite a bit. So the Assemble team, we really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope that everyone on the call appreciates it.
Thank you so much, attendees, for joining us today. We truly appreciate you spending some time getting to know more about Assemble and Matheson Constructors. And if you need any help setting up your Power BI integration, just give us a call and we will be more than happy to help you guys out. We hope that you can join us again on another Assemble webinar. Take care and have a wonderful day.